was so bad today. I can't believe I ate all that. I'm gonna have to make up for this tomorrow. And all that guilt. I feel out of control. I mean, completely out of control. If food has made you feel guilty, I want that to all end today, because everything you thought you knew about appetite and cravings might have been wrong. And we are finally giving you permission to eat with joy every single day. Joining me is Mark Schatzker, author of The End of Craving, Recovering the Lost Wisdom of Eating Well. When you started to write this book, you took a trip to Italy, which you say to completely change your ideas about food.
It
and
blew
it
my mind.
Based on real data.
Yeah. Let's talk about my favorite subject, Italian food. Think of all the amazing foods that come from Italy. Pizza, lasagna, ravioli, olive oil, risotto. Nobody eats as well as the Italians. They have turned blending carbs and fat into a high art. People from all over the world fly in droves to Italy just so they can eat as Italians.
But it's not good for you, right?
Well, you know what's even more amazing about Italian food than the Italian food? It's how much they weigh. Yeah. Northern Italy, they eat the richest food in Northern Italy. The rate of obesity there, it's less than 10%. Here, the last time the CDC checked, 42%, and that was before the pandemic. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's not fair. Why do they get to eat all this amazing food and stay trim? I'm saying there's good news here, because we can learn from them. They're telling us that it's possible to eat great food and not pay a heavy price.
Despite the fact all the meals you mentioned, which are just incredible and joyous, are ones that are associated with weight gain, we're seeing in real life, forget about clinical trials and all that, we're seeing in real life it doesn't seem to happen. So Mark argues that your appetite and eating don't work the way most people think. And I'm going to give you a vacuum cleaner to let you explain.
Yeah, so most of us think that the appetite is kind of, by nature, out of control, that it's permanently on like a vacuum cleaner. We're always just hoovering in food. We know specifically this is wrong from starvation experiments, where they really restrict calories. What they find is subjects become absolutely obsessed with eating. It takes total control of their brains, even their bodies. Their metabolism slows down. So it's like a total mind-body war to conserve calories. Your brain is in control here.
Yeah, but unfortunately, when you overeat, you get a very different reaction.
Well, and this is even more interesting. People think, my stomach's a bottomless pit. I could eat forever. That's also not true. They do overfeeding studies where they force people to eat, and they hate it. It is so difficult to get people to really overeat that they have to have some of these studies in prisons, because people will just leave the experiment. But here's the most amazing thing of all. They gain weight in these overfeeding experiments. When the experiments end, the pounds drop off. They come back to their original body weight.
So then why do most diets fail? If your body listens to your brain, would you always go to your playing weight?
Yeah, so most diets, they all work in the beginning. The pounds seem to melt off. You put on your old pair of jeans, people stop in the street, they say, hey, you look great, and you do look great. But then around the 6 to 8 month mark, things start to change. You say, I swear I'm eating less, but the pounds are coming back. And it's because you're fighting a war with a very powerful part of your brain, and your brain wins. This is why people get into this cycle with diets. They seem to work, then it fails. They bounce from diet to diet to diet. And some scientists are worried that this kind of bouncing around all the time is actually making things worse.
So is the reason you're failing at 6 months because you actually are eating more than you thought? Or is there something happening biologically?
It's because your brain says, I'm registering, you're not eating as much, our body weight's going down, I want it to come back up.
All right, so people harden themselves about how often they eat, how they're often shrouded with guilt in their decisions, but we are giving people permission today to let that guilt go and actually enjoy food. I'm going to show you why, because it's actually hardwired in our food craving. So what do we get wrong about this whole concept?
Yeah, so modern neuroscience has taught us so much about how we misunderstand obesity. Most people think, let's take a milkshake. Most people think that a person with obesity drinks that milkshake, their brain just lights up like a Christmas tree. It's incredible. That's why they let themselves go. That's why they don't know moderation. Well, here's what that brain scan looks like, and we're not seeing a lot of activity.
You'd expect, I got to say, this whole part of the brain up here, like a snowstorm would light up. This is, trivial.
Yeah.
It's in primitive part of the brain. What gives?
Even more interesting is people, of a more healthy weight, they actually experience more pleasure from that milkshake. So it's like a raw deal. Now, where do we see the difference? It's not when they drink the milkshake. It's when they see the milkshake. They get this burst of desire, this craving. So it's a really miserable situation. People crave food. They want it more than anything, and then they get the food, and it's just this dribble of pleasure. It's just an awful cycle.
Which I think if you really focus on what you sense when you're going through the emotions of about to have the milkshake, oh, it looks good, now I just ate it, I think it explains that mismatch that sometimes happens. So why is it that Italians are able to stay trim? Their brains are just like our brains, aren't they?
Because Italians never lost faith in the goodness of real food. They think good food should come from the land, it should come from the sea. They didn't buy into all this processed food, the artificial flavors, the artificial fats, the artificial sweeteners. It's so interesting to me. We all get in food arguments, but here we argue about carbs, we argue about fat, we think we're scientists. In Italy, they argue, they say, my grandmother's pasta recipe is better than yours. They are obsessed with the experience of food, and I think they're right.
My pasta fazool wins. All right, show us how we can eat foods, again, without all the guilt, with the joy that we actually want.
Yeah, it's, be careful about counting calories because that can be misleading. And I'll give you an example. I don't eat a lot of fast food, but sometimes, you're stuck in an airport, your flight's delayed, you got to eat something. What amazes me is how quickly I will eat that meal. It goes down and I'm just not satisfied. It's like I could eat it again. I've eaten like 1,000, 1,200 calories and I could do it all over again. I have a similar meal at home in terms of calories. I might make a steak, mashed potatoes, a Caesar salad. I eat it slowly. It's a delicious, immersive experience. And I'm not hungry after. I'm not even hungry the next day. So I would say don't count calories. Count the actual enjoyment that food is giving you.
Yeah, and I think also you eat food that comes out of the ground looking the way it looks when you eat it, and it'll bring you that joy you're speaking.
That's right. That's what we were designed to eat, is real food.
And those brain scans will thank you for it. All right, up next, how to finally get rid of those cravings that are getting in the way of your weight loss. Diet culture has put us in a tailspin of what we can and cannot eat. First, there was no carbs, then it was no fats. But what if we can toss that rule book out the window and begin to trust our intuition again? Author of The End of Craving, Recovering the Lost Wisdom of Eating Well, Mark Schatzker is here to show us exactly how we can get the joy we want and still lose weight. So how do we do that? How do we stop craving and desiring and pursuing foods that aren't really in our best interest, that don't give us pleasure?
So when I was researching the book, I visited an obesity lab in Germany, one of the world's leading labs on this, and I took part in a really interesting therapy called Q exposure therapy. And it started, the scientists gave me these 2 potato chips, and I wasn't allowed to eat them. I could smell them, I could rub them together, I could nibble them, and I was this just incredible wave of craving came over me. I mean, it was painful. And what it taught me that there's foods that we crave that we don't really enjoy. I mean, think about it. When people say, what's your favorite food? You never say, yeah, there was that bag of chips back in 1998, right?
Right.
But then I learned there's a different brain circuit, and that has to do with actually enjoying food. She gave me this little square of exquisitely good chocolate and just let it melt in my mouth. And it was immersive. It just took me on this journey. This tiny little piece of chocolate gave me so much pleasure. And what she found is that she can give patients that suffer from binge eating disorder, when these cravings come on, she'll have them have just this little piece of chocolate, and it extinguishes the craving.
Did you bring me any chocolate? Of course not, Schatzker.
I ate it all.
We ate it all, right? Couldn't stop himself. We asked one self-proclaimed binge eater to try this technique at home. Let's see if it worked. And I was curious, could it help diminish their intense cravings?
I consider myself a really serious binge eater. I've been binging probably since I was about 5 years old. I've tried everything. I've been to diet camps. I've been on many diets. I have lost between 35 and 95 pounds at a time, only to gain it back. My cravings can get really intense. It almost feels like a drug addiction. I usually start with salty foods, spaghetti, macaroni, pizza, and then as soon as I have that, I go to sweet. And then I just circle between them like a terrible cycle until I'm so stuffed I don't know what to do with myself. I feel like I really can't stop these cravings, and I'm really excited to try this new technique. Usually I would eat this lasagna and cake and not be able to resist my cravings. But today, I'm going to try this high-quality chocolate and see if it will reduce my urge.
Zipporah joins us in studio. So how has food become a burden in your life?
So food's been a problem probably since I was 5 or 7. I started binge eating when I was actually in diet camp for the first time in 6th grade. I've gone up and down my entire life. I've never been able to maintain my weight.
But right now, as you go through your day-to-day existence, how is it a burden?
I hide it. I go to when I binge, I would sometimes go to 3 stores to buy things so people wouldn't know how much I was buying. And it's created incredible weight gain in a very short amount of time.
So Mark asked you to replicate this experiment that he had learned in Germany, where you basically savor and enjoy the food, even that small bit of chocolate square, which I haven't gotten from either of you yet, right? How did that start changing your mind around food?
It was actually really incredible. I noticed that in every diet plan that I've been on, they tell you, when you're full, don't eat. And when you have a craving, when you have an urge, don't eat. And this was the first time I noticed I was actually full, but had this incredible, it's almost like a drug addiction to binge. And I took this chocolate, I ate it mindfully, which I already knew about mindful eating, but with the addition of the chocolate, it totally just decreased the craving and the urge. Yeah.
I noticed this actually just watching people who are older who have maintained their weight. They find those small little hacks that get them where they need to be, especially late at night. Or they don't just fall off the train. Because once you've had half the pint of ice cream, why stop? Right? You don't have to fix it tomorrow anyway. And a doctor, I got to say, I constantly think about the foods we eat and how they affect the body. Differentiating wanting and liking, right? It doesn't just apply to snacks we crave. It applies to everything we put in our bodies. And food it's when it's not as processed, Mark, our body, it's in a way game for our body when it's processed. When it's real, I think we can put meaning into that food.
I totally agree. And I think the thing to remember is, there's so many things we put into our food that messes our brain up. So it's not going to switch overnight. But I think as you start to eat real food again, your brain starts to develop a better relationship. So I met a patient at this lab I visited in Germany, and she told me she started with dark chocolate, and she said she didn't like it at first. She found it bitter, but she stuck with it. Over time, she really started to enjoy it. And then one day she tried milk chocolate again, and she said, "This is too sweet." And when she told me, she said, the thing about dark chocolate is you can never eat too much and you can't eat it quickly. And I think that's a lesson we need to think about all food. It's about the immersive enjoyment of food. That's how eating is supposed to be.
Yeah. Sip your calories.
That's right.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad it worked for you as well.
Thank you very much.
Keep it up. You can find all the answers to what your body truly needs in Mark's new book, The End of Craving, Recovering the Lost Wisdom of Eating Well. Please check it out. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on new videos to live the good life.